Good morning everyone, and welcome to Melissa's Motifs. Today I'm going to start a huge project that I've been gathering things for months now, and it'll be this mailbox. I have here plenty of Capodimonte flowers, some small objects, a lot of beads, and of course birds. One of these I had to wait. This came from Hungary, and it's one of my favorite kinds of birds. It's damaged. It was broken and then glued back together like a lot of these are. And then of course I'll have the trusty postman. So I'm mixing up my concrete mortar, and it's hard for me to tell you exact measurements because it varies from place to place and time to time. Just try to get it so that the end result has the texture of brownie mix. And this picture says gray. I always use the white mortar and then color it if I want to. And be sure that it's the kind that says just add water. It used to be you had to buy an additive to go with it to give it its adhesive properties, but luckily we no longer have to do that. Then I'm adding a little bit of pigment to it. The colors I'm using are burnt umber and golden sunset. At this point here, I have made a huge mistake. I had forgotten to rough up the surface of the mailbox before I started gluing down. I decided to continue with the video thinking that it might be a good learning experience video. Plus then I could put disaster in the title and get a lot more viewers. People love a good craft disaster story. And in my defense, this is the first project I've done since my 2-year-long illness, so I'm a little out of practice. Look, the little doggy here. With some little heart-shaped beads I got from Etsy. And I really want to support this guy. Then I'll be placing some shards and large beads around the bases of these floral pieces to keep them set. I wasn't as diligent as I'd hoped to be as far as recording every single thing that I put on the top of this. But sometimes when I get really involved in these pieces, the outside world just kind of fades away. But you can get the idea of the technique from the things I'm doing here, I hope. That's pretty good. Royal Copley, or Copley, right here. One of my favorites, and it's broken and then glued back together, but it's still beautiful. I put this bird in a shopping bag and gave the base a little tap with my hammer, and it just fell away from the bird. Now that might be a little bit big, but I'm gonna have so much stuff on here that I think that it will be okay. I have the mailbox tipped over just a little bit so that the bird will stay put when I glue it on. And here I've snuggled some bigger rim pieces next to the bird to give it a lot of support. Okay, so I have a disaster here. This is the part where everything started sliding off because I had forgotten to rough up the surface. Went back and roughed up the box and spread a thin layer of mastic over the whole thing and let it dry for a couple of days. Then I went and glued the big chunks back together with mortar. Putting everything back on the best I could. I don't like this dent here, so I'm going to try to build that back up. Sometimes when I make real big mistakes, they turn out better than I had even planned in the first plan. Figurine of the lady in the beautiful dress is another occupied Japan item and had been a salt shaker. My camera was apparently on high speed when I was doing this part. This is a tiny little walkway for the mailman. Onto the sides here. I'm not measuring anything out on this project. If I were making this as an item to sell, I might have made sure that everything was spaced correctly and evenly, but for my own personal use, this is me. Mailbox is resting on a pillow and some other soft things to make sure I don't put too much pressure on the beautiful flowers and things on the other side. I get my tiny tile from Mosaic Basics. Would not go anywhere else to get my tiny tile. I love the combination of square and round. Especially when it's a chaotic piece like this, it's nice to be able to rest your eyes on something that is somewhat uniform. You want to make sure that you bury your shards with the sharp edges covered so that you don't have to go back and grind them later. This batch of grout is a little, or batch of mortar is a little thinner than I would usually make it, but this area here has to be pretty flat to allow room for that flag to come down. Well, I think that'll be okay. That very bottom there has to be clear for the screws or whatever it is that it's installed with. And I want to be sure that I don't block that hinge for the door at the bottom there. I had wanted to put in some of my beautiful red coral pieces, along here, but I was just afraid that they would not hold. So I took my hammer and I bashed up a bunch of them so that I could come out with some halves to use. And I'm going to put something kind of fun in here. Some keys. I think they're railroad keys, but I'm not sure. Putting this little floral piece right up next to where that sharp edge of the hand is. I forget about the power of orange sometimes. You can see that I haven't properly cleared that big pink shard, and that's going to come back to haunt me at cleanup time. These are some beautiful beads. I don't know what they are, but they're just my kind of color. They make good little supporting pieces too. The more support I can have under that bird, the better. You can see here that I've just put tiny towel on the rim of the door. Sometimes your little pieces can actually kind of tell you how to be placed. Later on, I'll go in there and put some flat shards where that flag comes up. I don't think I caught that on film, but there wasn't much to it really. I don't really care much for this figurine. The face is beautiful, but I think in pieces it might be kind of cool. Look at the shard on her skirt. Put this in a small baggie and just bashed it lightly with a hammer. And these are my aquamarine beads that I am just crazy about. I rarely put shards on top of shards, but in this case, this area just needs improvement. There we go. Not bad. At this point, there's a couple of things as far as the design goes. Now, when I do Pique Assiette mosaic, I like to have my bigger pieces like this blended in a little bit so that they're more subtle. So in other words, I don't want someone to look at this and say, wow, there's a mailman, or there's a bird. I want them to be more like, oh, that's a mailman. And look at that bird. So this guy's a little bit out here in the open. I'm going to be looking through my things to give him a little bit more coverage. Keep supporting those larger pieces. I'm going to sort of slide past the front of the box for now. I had tried to use Sharpie markers on little yellow tiles to put our name and address numbers, but of course they washed off immediately, so I'll have to figure that out later. And here we go with the back. The reason why I haven't tipped this thing over so that I'm spreading on the top of it is because I'm afraid of things falling off. I'm going to give it a little bit more dry time before I tip it on its end. I have to say, most of my attention has been directed to the top of this thing. Ordinarily, I would not grout over a piece like this. This is supposed to be one of those mosaics that's like a grotto where there's little, can you see these little pillows that come up around the shards? That is the grotto look, and one that many people love. However, it bothers me, and in some places I didn't put enough concrete mortar down to even have that effect. So what I've got here are ugly lines, dark lines. And so I'm going to take a thin, give it a thin bath. I'm going to grout it with mortar. I'm out of gloves at this point. And this is darker than that other lower layer of concrete is. And I like the darker color because I think it shows off the pastel shards better.
I think I might have to get a big steel hose to hold that thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't you think it's, I mean, I can hardly lift it. Discussing how we're going to install this. If our current post is strong enough. Yeah, I think I like this a whole lot better now with that darker background. It's real easy when you first put your grout down to panic because you've just covered up all your beautiful things, but just remember you've got a pretty good amount of working time, about an hour. I like to get mine done within 20 minutes of pouring, just to be on the safe side. And try to do your grouting at a time when you won't be interrupted. That is the worst problem I've ever had with this. Don't try to cook or do laundry or something like that. Just focus on this one thing. And this is much more watery than you would usually use too. And the reason for that is because I need to just pour it into some of these holes. I'll be using my trusty nail, my toothpicks, Q-tips maybe, although I'm not that crazy about Q-tips for this because the cotton tends to unwind from the stick and get caught in the grout. After about 24 hours, it's safe to use the hose. And I'm just going to go over it on the shower setting. And I've got a toothbrush here. That's what I start with. Then I'm going to just gently pat at it and rub very lightly. I have my Dremel grinder here that I'm going to be using. And I'll probably be working on this on and off for the next couple of days. Okay, I'm gonna finish off the front of the mailbox here. This had been up in the air for a little while I decided what to do with it. I've been looking for a place to use this pretty earring. Getting close to the end here, and I will be sealing it with this sealant that I have pictured here. And then this is my little dedication card on the inside of the door. It says, this box is dedicated to the carriers of the United States Postal Service. We appreciate your hard work and value to our neighborhood. Now I'm just doing some fine tuning, covering up some of these white edges with nail polish, which isn't ideal, but I guess it's okay for now. I'll just have to see how well this holds up. We have some fierce weather here in Iowa, so time will tell. I have to say that this is probably the funnest project that I have worked on. One of the funnest, and thank you for joining me. Let me know if you have any questions. Just leave them in the comment section below.